Hello, everyone. I'm Lana Zach. Thanks so much for joining us. Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon is expected to surrender to federal authorities on Monday. A federal grand jury indicted Bannon Friday. He faces 2 charges of contempt of Congress for failing to cooperate with the House panel investigating the January 6th attack. Lawmakers are also threatening to hold former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows in contempt as he fails to comply with a subpoena to appear before Congress. CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion reports.
Former White House strategist Steve Bannon is charged with 2 counts of contempt of Congress for failing to comply with a subpoena from the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. According to the indictment, Bannon did not produce documents and communications and did not appear for a deposition. Each count carries a maximum penalty of up to $1,000 and 1 year in jail.
There's a lot of noise out there today, ladies and gentlemen, but remember, there's no whining, no tears.
The 67-year-old Trump ally is the first individual charged in the Select Committee probe. The panel alleges Bannon appears to have played a multifaceted role in the events of January 6th and had specific knowledge about them, including this warning on January 5th.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow.
His indictment comes as the former president's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, was a no-show for a deposition Friday. The committee is threatening him with contempt, too, stating it's unfortunate that Mr. Meadows has chosen to join a very small group of witnesses who believe they are above the law.
You can't allow these individuals who have information that the committee needs to simply flout their obligation, thumb their nose at Congress and the law.
Meantime, Trump is facing more scrutiny for comments he made in an interview with ABC News' Jonathan Karl, defending supporters who called for his vice president's execution.
No, you heard those chants. That was terrible. I mean, this,
he could have. Well, the people were very angry.
We're saying hang Mike.
Because it's common sense, John.
Joining us now is CBS News legal contributor and former Manhattan prosecutor Rebecca Roiphe. Rebecca, always good to have you on the show. So, Steve Bannon is expected to turn himself in and make his first court appearance on Monday. How does the case proceed from there? And could he actually face time behind bars?
Hi, Lana. Thanks for having me on. So the case will proceed as it would with any other defendant. Bannon will appear before a judge and will be read the charges against him. He will plead guilty or not guilty, and a bail determination will be made. At that point, the case goes forward and discovery will happen. Either he will plead guilty at some point or he will proceed to trial, which I think is probably more likely. And if he does, we could see a jury trial in that case.
Well, the House voted about 3 weeks ago to hold Bannon in contempt. He was just charged by the Department of Justice on Friday. So in the meantime, what's been happening behind the scenes?
So, I think this is a complicated case, and it was a hard case for the Department of Justice, in part because there are these 2 internal memos inside the Department of Justice that dictate not charging a former White House official or a current White House official for contempt of Congress in cases like this. In addition, there's a Supreme Court case that says a former president has at least some power to assert the privilege in certain circumstances. So those were definitely a hurdle, and I think it was hard probably for Merrick Garland and for the team to decide in this case to go forward. And, I really think what propelled him, obviously Merrick Garland, as you said, has come forward and said, we follow the rule of law, we follow facts, we follow evidence and no man is above the law. But what actually happened here behind the scenes, who knows? I think that what's happening here is a reaction to the brazen response of Trump in breaking norms in the past administration and essentially stonewalling any kind of investigation or any kind of oversight by Congress. This is a break from the past where most of these things used to get settled by a handshake and, some kind of determination of what sorts of questions are appropriate and what sorts aren't. But the Trump administration really insisted on digging its heels in here. And so I think this is the effort of the January 6th committee and then of the Department of Justice to make a clear statement. This is a crime and it will be prosecuted, and send a message that Congress does have oversight power. So it is a co-equal branch, and there is a way in which it can get its orders enforced by a court.
And Rebecca, you were talking about how difficult this was potentially for Merrick Garland in this highly politicized environment. Give us some context. What type of precedent exists in holding officials in contempt of Congress?
It's incredibly rare. And the reason why it's rare is, as I said, normally these things get settled by co-equal branches. There's a negotiation, a back and forth, perhaps even argument, and it can be harsh, but it ends up with some kind of determination of what will be accepted. And that has no longer been the case with regard to Trump and Trump's officials. And so I think that this is a way in which the Department of Justice is saying there's a limit. There's a limit to that, to the way in which you can kind of use the fact that that much of this is enforced through norms to escape legislative oversight. So, as I said, there really aren't very many precedents, and the last successful prosecutions were during the Watergate scandal, and before that, the House Un-American Activities Committee, that were investigating potential communists. So these are obviously rare, and they often do come at these moments where there's a real break in our norms, and the break in which breaks in the way we normally resolve these kinds of disputes between the branches.
Those moments in history that generations that follow have studied. Rebecca, exactly. So you said that it looks very likely that Steve Bannon is going to push forward for a jury trial. How long might that take before it's actually resolved? I'm wondering that in part because a lot of people are asking what effect Bannon's indictment might have on other subpoenaed officials and their cooperation. But if Bannon's case is still really ongoing, I wonder if that also tempers things a bit.
I'm not sure about that, because if you're an official like Mark Meadows and you're watching this all play out, I don't know whether what you're ultimately thinking is, will Bannon be convicted or acquitted of this particular crime, but rather, what will the effect be of an indictment on my political career? So it seems like the relevant deterrent part of this is the indictment itself, rather than the actual conviction. Of course, the DOJ, the Department of Justice, and the prosecutors who are assigned to this case want to obtain a conviction, but I'm not sure that it dragging out will really be what makes or breaks the deterrent effect it has on these other officials, and whether they will in some way agree, or at least agree to negotiate with Congress and come to some kind of resolution about what sorts of questions they're willing to answer.
And for Bannon, how long might this process take before it's finally resolved?
These things can take a while, and that's the question. I think certainly it will take months, if not a year or more, to get to the final point, because there are lots of steps along the way. And the question is whether he, pushes this all the way to trial, which I imagine he probably will, because the fear, again, we're looking at a misdemeanor case where the maximum time in jail is 1 year, and $1,000. Meanwhile, he gets the spotlight and in some ways becomes a kind of star or a martyr for certain segments of the political community. And so I can't imagine he would be interested here in taking a plea. And so if it goes all the way, this really could drag out.
All right. Rebecca Roiphe, thank you for joining and helping us to understand all of this a bit more.
Thanks so much for having me, Lana.